Well, hello everyone. Um, Gosh, what a difference a weekend of rest makes. So, I wanted to try something a little different here. I've been wanting to make content more frequently than every month, and I guess I've always been struggling because I'm always scrambling to try and keep the auction going and keep it stocked and supplied. And this weekend was really a point where I recognized I had to make a major change, and on a couple of levels. One on the business level and the amount of responsibility I give my people, letting go of control, but also trying to find a way to get content up faster than I've been doing. When I started this channel, my intention was to make it just strictly about stamps and to put strictly stamp content in. And that's difficult to do. Because again, you would think it would be easy, but when I'm trying to come up with edited videos and specific topics, it's time consuming. It's hard to get to it. But then it hit me on Friday. I mean, I spend every single day here I work, and I spend a lot of time running the business. And I thought, I can sort of diarize and post about some of my experiences on a daily basis. And mixed in with that will be a lot of stamp information, but it will also be business information about the whole, giving you guys a glimpse into the world of a stamp dealer and the kinds of things that we deal with and the challenges that we face trying to serve collectors and trying to serve the broader hobby. Um, so So I thought, okay, why don't I try seeing if I can find time to shoot um, some actual videos on a daily basis, just quick ones or relatively quick ones. Maybe not today, but quicker, you know, in the future, and just uploading them and seeing what you make of them, and seeing if you're interested in the content, and if I'll see from the views and the comments and such whether the interest level's there. And if it is, I'll continue it. And if it isn't, well, I'll wind it down. Um, so today, I think what I want to talk about is a little bit about what happened during the week, what has happened this morning, and how I came to where I'm at. Um, so one of the very big challenges about running a stamp auction like this and running a business is trying to keep people supplied with the stamps they want and trying to do it in a manner that's cost effective and works with the numbers and with your labor costs. Um, and trying to figure out what makes the most sense, from a business point of view, is not always obvious. When I started this business, my general idea or my general impression was that, the more valuable the stamps that I put in the auction, the better the results would be. And there would be more demand for stamps with a high catalog value and less demand for stamps with a low catalog value. And so, for the first couple of years I ran the sale, I gravitated towards buying higher value lots. But, inevitably what I found is that my perception is not always true. Um, I can put up, $70 stamps from the 1920s that are fine to very fine and watch them go for 10% all day long. And unless I buy them extremely cheaply or extremely well, that's a non-starter. That's a totally unsustainable business model, because when I sink the labor into that and I do all the detailed descriptions of the scanning, I mean, I'm not even covering my costs, let alone being able to make a profit to be able to continue. And before I get into the mechanics of this, I want to explain a little bit about why I'm here and the role that profit plays in my life. So, for those who don't know me, I'm a chartered accountant. My dream was to run a stamp business since I was 9 years old. And I've said in previous videos, I didn't receive really any support from my parents for this, or my family. I mean, most people I talked to really believed sincerely that this hobby was on its way out. That was over 40 years ago. They didn't regard it as a valid or legitimate career choice. And so I got, it got ignored. You know, if I brought it up, the subject would get changed. Or it would be, well, you know, why don't you go into accounting? Or why don't you do, you know, something else? So, you know, I really didn't get into this until much, much, much later in the last 10 years because I got to a point in my life where I had made it to partner. I had gone through the grind of earning my stripes, paying my dues, you know, joining the old boy network and getting my foot in the door, which was no small feat for somebody who's an autistic, born at a time when autism was not well understood. And there were no allowances made for people on the spectrum. I mean, heck, there still aren't today. I mean, you look at what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is saying. Now, at least now, there's some outrage at the kind of stigma he's trying to attach to this. That's a new development and a plus, but the stigma is still there. And when I was growing up, there were no allowances made for this. You know, and so being able to overcome that, being able to make it in a profession that has traditionally had very little tolerance for people who are cut from a different cloth. Accounting is very much about sameness and conformity. And, you know, the firms try to present an almost monolithic appearance to their employees. It's very, very difficult. I mean, I still, even back then, would not have made it in a big 6 firm or a big 4 firm because I'm too different. But I did manage to make partner in a smaller regional firm, which was, again, like I said, a big deal. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy because I have this vast passion for stamps. I think this is the coolest hobby in the world, and I'll tell you why. You know, what connects us as human beings, what makes us unique, is our desire to communicate with one another and to form and maintain connections, and verbal and spoken connections. We take it for granted today because it's so easy. It's so easy to pick up a phone. Long distance is negligibly cheap now. You have Skype, you have WhatsApp, you have so many choices for keeping in touch with people who are thousands of miles away and being able to literally interact with them in real time on a screen. I used to dream of that. That was science fiction when I was growing up. It didn't exist. It was expensive to keep in touch with people. It was hard. But going back into the 1840s or the 1850s, it was the way that you kept in touch with somebody that didn't live in your village or didn't live close to you was with a letter. And letters, you know, prior to the introduction of the penny black, prior to 1840, letters were expensive. They cost upwards of, I think most letter rates in a lot of places, if we go back to England or English colonies, a lot of letters, because they were based on mileage in kilometers, so if you wanted to write a letter to somebody a couple of 100 miles away, I mean, you could be spending a shilling or 6 pence in, you know, 1830s, 1820s money, and that was a fantastic amount of money. I can't remember what the CPI or exchange rates are in terms of purchasing power equivalents, but I think a penny was about the equivalent of $2 or $3, if I remember correctly. Like it was a fair amount of money. It was very expensive to send letters. And so when Rowland Hill came out with the penny black in 1840, and he made a universal penny postage where anybody could send a letter anywhere in England for a penny. That was a huge, huge, huge development. And we don't, as people today, we have really no idea of how big a deal that was. And it didn't really cost a whole lot more as the postal system evolved around the world. You had this organization in Bern, Switzerland, that basically coordinated all of the post offices and postal systems around the world. So you had to transcend geography, you had to transcend language differences, you had to deal with currency differences, you had to make sure that the postage was paid in all the different currencies, and you had to deal with situations where it wasn't paid correctly. And there was a very sophisticated system set up to deliver letters that were short paid, but which, had postage on them. Nowadays, if you don't put the right amount of postage on a letter, they just don't even deliver it. It comes back to you. But back in the old days, they actually delivered it. And they charged the recipient a fine for the unpaid postage plus a surcharge. And there was a sophisticated way of converting currencies into a common base currency and then converting it back to come up with the actual amount in the country of destination. So everyone in the different international system had to know, in order to implement that, they had to know what the stamps looked like. They had to know what each country was using, what was valid, what wasn't valid. That's very, very big. So, to develop that kind of system and implement it and have it function smoothly enough that a person could mail a letter from, say, Canada and have it arrive, in Asia in 2 or 3 weeks' time, or a week. In some instances, I've seen postmarks from the 1850s or 1870s where letters are taking a week to make transatlantic voyages, going all the way through the Pacific. Taking really not much more time than letters take today. At the turn of the century in London, England, or certainly more the turn of the century up to, say, about 1920, it was pretty common for people to invite dinner guests over by sending them a letter or a card, an invitation in the morning. Go and post it in the morning. The person receives it, replies, posts it back. They receive it in the afternoon or in the evening. That very, very common around that time, and that's how integrated the postal system was in London. It was almost like using the telephone. So it's fascinating. But where the actual interest in stamps comes in is that when you think about how you show prepayment of the fees for these services, it's very, very apparent very quickly that you don't, from a utilitarian perspective, it really isn't necessary to have anything on the piece of paper that basically says the fees have been paid. It doesn't necessarily have to tell you what the fees are. It doesn't really have to show much of anything. It probably will have to have an official look to it so people know that it's real. But it really, a simple numeral of the amount paid is enough of a design. And indeed, in the very early stamps, the very first part of this hobby, the stamps from the 1850s and 60s, a number of them did just consist of numerals on a background. But then over time, because we're a creative species, we started putting actual artwork on stamps. We started commemorating places and people and events. And we started designing ever intricate designs. We put our artistic expression onto stamps. because it was the most common media that traveled the world. And so, everything that we thought was worth fighting for or protecting or celebrating, we put on stamps. And you can take a culture or a society's cultural temperature by looking at what's on their stamps. And you can see it evolve. You can see the collective personality of that country through its stamps. You can see what they prioritized, what they thought mattered. You can see what they aspired to. And you can see how that changes over time. If you look at, say, the stamps of the U.S. From the last, 60 or 70 years, what's very striking about them is that they feature a lot of subjects, including some very technical, scientific subjects, things that the average layperson probably wouldn't know anything about, and they make it look like, oh, everybody knows about this, which is the United States basically portraying itself in the way that it wished it was, and isn't. But it's what they aspire to be as a country. It's the type of society and education level they want to be able to aspire to. And they put that on their stamps. It's very distinct. No other country that I know of has quite that level of worldliness displayed on their stamps. And very few countries where it stands in such sharp contrast to how the actual country is in reality. It's fascinating. So there's that aspect to stamps, but then there's the actual puzzle of the production of the stamps and how they come about and how they're printed and how they're distributed and how they're used. And for people who like to solve puzzles and complex puzzles, there's really nothing better than trying to study a stamp, look for the differences, the minute differences in papers, in inks, in the design features, and trying to figure out which ones are different, how are they different from one another, and then trying to figure out which ones came first, and whether were these differences intentional or were they accidental. And if they were intentional, what periods did they correspond to, and why were they introduced, and what were they trying to do? And as you go through that, you form, it's like a puzzle that where you don't know how many pieces there are, and you don't really know what the completed picture is going to look like until you start working on it. And the picture can change, and it can go in different directions. You can be collecting one way and studying the stamps a certain way, and a certain pattern and picture will emerge, but then you can change the variables and decide to focus on a different aspect of it, and you'll get to a different picture. You can start off in one direction, get overwhelmed, discover that it's way more encompassing than you realize, narrow down, sell off the stuff you're not really interested in pursuing, and take it in a new direction. Or you can decide that you're not really interested in getting into the fine details of the stamps, and you really just like collecting pretty pictures, and you can do that too. And you can collect different topics. I mean, every single topic. One of the things I love about modern stamps is that every single topic that you can imagine, I don't care what it is on the stamp. Certainly the stamps issued in the last 70 years. Up to about the last 70, the most common design on a stamp was usually either an industry or something that the colonies wanted to show off or glorify, or it would be a world leader, it would be the ruler. But there would be very little in the way of generic topicals like chess or, flowers or birds, or, those were more common, but they're esoteric topicals like chess championships are a thing of the modern era. But, what we found over time is, as social causes take hold, that gets reflected in the stamps. So, stamps of Scandinavia in the last 10 years are beginning to feature LGBTQ themes right on the stamps, which is, we haven't quite gotten to that point yet. The Scandinavians are way more progressive than we are, but that's coming. So, you can see how the culture of the country changes over time. If you look at Canada, and this is a very good example, if you look at Canadian stamps from the 1950s, they are all explorers and older white men. There are really no native Aboriginal peoples. I mean, there is the Emily Pauline Johnson stamp from 1960 or 61. There may be some portrayals on a few stamps from that period of a famous Indigenous person. But everything is still very ethnocentric. It's from the white person's perspective completely. Canada is portrayed as something that was discovered, not something that was already inhabited and basically taken over. But you start to see all of that change, even as early as 1970. In a span of less than 20 years, you see the entire flavor of what's on the stamps change. And then you see that progresses as the years go on. And today's Canadian stamps are just completely different in terms of what's featured on them and what they're celebrating compared with what they were depicting and showing, 60 years ago. I find that aspect very, very fascinating, and then the production aspect of it as well. And also the fact that, no matter what topics you're interested in, you can find crossover appeal in stamps, and you can pursue almost any other hobby, by collecting the stamps associated with that hobby. You don't have to get overly serious in any other way. So it just offers so many possibilities to so many people. But it's under threat. And the biggest threat that the hobby of stamp collecting faces is negativity from older collectors who really are married to and really committed to this idea that it's dying out. And they're doing a great deal to accelerate that demise. Because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you're not careful. If you don't expose younger people to stamps, if you don't show your collections off, if you use up all your early stamps still on mail where you can, instead of buying the newer stamps, if you mistreat your material and you don't cherish it and you don't show that it's worth collecting and it's worth studying, then it's very difficult to expect anybody else to take up collecting it as a serious pursuit. And so I think the biggest thing, that the hobby needs is it needs champions, and it needs younger people like myself. I mean, I am 53, but for this hobby, I'm quite young. It needs people who believe in it to come and champion it, to make it accessible to people of all different income levels, to educate people about the different ways that the stamps can be collected, and to just generally be there as a resource to help every collector get the absolute most maximum enjoyment they can out of the stamps that they're collecting. And a lot of that is education, and telling them things they didn't know about their stamps, showing them ways they can examine their stamps to see other things they may have missed. I tried to do a lot of that through my blog writing. But what I found, of course, is that writing blog content is extremely labor intensive. It's time consuming, and ultimately, I mean, like everybody, I have to pay for my time. I have to find a way. If I'm going to spend all my time blogging and articling and writing articles about stamps, then I have to find a way to keep the lights on. And, I don't think, my perception generally is that I don't think a lot of people are going to pay for the blog. And I don't particularly want to charge people for my knowledge explicitly either. That because to me, I'm here because I want to make this as accessible as possible. So what does one do in that situation? How do you, if you're not independently wealthy and you don't have a trust fund and you're not in a situation where you can just, wake up and do your own thing every day, how do you reclaim your time so that you have time to educate people and spread your knowledge and contribute to the hobby? And so the only way I could think of to do it was to actually be in business, actually supply people stamps, actually provide them with value. And if I did that consistently enough, then those people will help support my other efforts. Maybe not directly. I mean, they're paying for the stamps I'm selling them. They're not giving me donations to do philatelic research, but they are supporting my business. And then if I can make the business pay the bills, keep the lights on, keep everything going, then I can take my time and I can devote it to the general hobby. And if I do a good enough job of that, I'll get enough support from my customers to keep everything going. That's in a basic nutshell what it is. So I'm not here to get rich. I've said this before in other videos, and I'm not. That's not my goal. That's not my aim. That's not why I'm here. Okay, I'm here to serve you. I'm here to educate you. I'm here to give you the benefit of what I've learned over almost 50 years of working with stamps of various kinds. And it's up to you to take whatever you can get out of it, whatever you think is valuable to you, and whatever whatever you feel is relevant, and then discard the rest. Um, I'm just happy to help. So, that's the background, and that sort of explains why I'm here, what I'm trying to accomplish. My challenges are that trying to keep the lights on, trying to do that, trying to make enough money to do that is very difficult. You have to sell a lot of stamps today. While the hobby isn't dying out, the prices for stamps in general, what people are willing to pay because of competition, is far, far less today than it used to be. And people are well informed. People have numerous options to buy the stamps that they want for their collection. It's very easy for them to shop around. And because they do that, it means that you get less and less money for the stamps that you're selling, which means you have to sell more of them. And you have to appeal to more and more customers. And you have to keep that, once you've got a customer base and you've developed an expectation of what you're going to be offering and how frequently you're going to be offering it, you have to stick to it. And so, in a way, you can become a victim of your own success very easily. You get to a point where you've got customers who are eagerly demanding material every week. And if you don't want to lose them and you want to keep them engaged and you want to help them, you have to keep coming up with new ideas and new auction selections and new material. You can't run the same thing every week. So, replenishing that material, finding it, describing it, getting it up on the website consistently, week after week after week after week, is a very challenging thing. It's the most challenging thing I've ever had to do. it's far, far harder than any work I've ever done. And by hard, I don't mean undesirable. I mean simply um, all-encompassing, time-consuming. Um, requires me to be able to learn how to read signals in online bidding so I don't pay too much, or I'm able to win the right number of watts, um, so that I have enough material for people. It's there's a lot that goes into it. And so because of that, most of the time that I've been running this business, I'm working insane hours. I told my guys this week that I was working until 2 in the morning. For the last couple of months, I've been working until 2 o'clock every morning, which is something I hadn't done in a couple of years. And then on Fridays, I was going as late as 4:30 or 6:30 in the morning. If I was to add up the number of hours I had outside the 9 to 5, I was working 57 extra hours a week, and it was getting to the point where I miss my wife. I don't see Steph very much anymore. We don't spend a lot of time together. We don't do very much together. And we were a couple that, when we first married and we were first dating, we went out every day. We went for walks every day. We ate meals together all the time. We did everything together. And that stopped as I started to get sucked into this routine of trying to keep up this auction. I hired both Will and Josh, and to be fair, I have used them. Excuse me. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I should probably edit that out, but I don't have time. Um, I use them to the extent that I can. But then again, because I'm not in this to be greedy and I'm not in this to get rich, then it follows that I also want to be a really good employer. I want to pay my guys fairly. I want to pay them for the work they're doing and pay them well. And I don't want to be too hard on them, and I don't want to demand more of them than I think they can give me. I have to recognize at all times that I'm a passionate philatelist with Asperger's syndrome, which means that my hyper focus and my ability to go through and sit and work on stamps for 24 hours is not normal. This is not something most neurotypicals can do. It's very hard for me to keep that in mind a lot of times. Very hard for me to remember that. I try, so I'm always having to check myself and ask myself if what I've given my guys is realistic, and is this really a fair amount of work to be demanding of them. And so, for a long time now, I keep jumping in and I keep grabbing the buckets out of their hands and trying to carry it for them, because it's a combination of being a bit of a control freak. It's wanting things to be a certain way, whether that's having all the lots in the same order in the auction, or whether it's having all the descriptions be the same style, or what have you. There's a lot of my condition that comes into play, um, as well as trying to help prevent them from becoming overwhelmed and stressed, and a whole host of other things that may make them decide to quit one day. So, I've been taking on more and more and more of the assembling of lots and all the difficult stuff that making up the lots and putting them up requires. So, it's gotten unsustainable. So on the weekend, what I did was I sent my guys an email and I basically told them the situation, spilled the beans, and I said, look, I'm running on fumes here. I know you guys are working hard. I know you're working a full week, but I got to get more. There's got to be a way to do this and get more labor. Now, I had thought about hiring a third person, but the reality is I'm not really making enough revenue at the moment to commit to that. And when I look at the number of extra hours I work, I have to take into account the fact that they're not efficient hours. That if I put in an extra 57 hours a week, it's not 57 real hours. There's no way that if I was well rested and I was starting at 8 o'clock every morning with a full breakfast and a cup of coffee, that it would take me 57 hours to get this work done. I don't actually know how long it would take, but I told them that I guessed it was probably no more than 30 in reality. So, which is not enough to justify hiring another full-time employee. It just isn't. So, it behooved me to try to talk to them to find a way for us to restructure the way we're doing our lotting, our whole process. Let's look at the whole process and see maybe we're not using everybody's strengths properly. Maybe there's another way to do this. And so that's what we did today. We tried to hash this out, and we came to the conclusion that I'm going to try really, really, really hard not to assemble and lot and enter more than 100 lots. I'm going to get Will now to do all of that. And I'm going to let Josh, because Josh doesn't like lotting. He finds all the detail and the intricacies of the stamps to be it's a stressful thing for him. And I don't want to stress him out. He likes to scan. He enjoys that. He enjoys doing discrete tasks that he knows how to do and that he can do well, and they have an end. He can get his work done for the day. He can go home. He can spend time with his kids and his wife, and he can come back the next day. Will's a different guy. Will, is younger. Will doesn't have kids. Will has a whole different mindset. So, and doesn't like scanning, but likes working on stamps. So, I've had this system going for the last little while where we've all been splitting up the lotting. We've all worked on. So if we had a 400 lot auction, we've each done about 150 lots. But it's not really the best use of everybody's time. It's not using people's strong suits in the best way. It's ignoring the fact that each person has different preferences on what they actually want to be doing when they work. And this is a mistake, I think, and this is why it's good, this content, the channel is going to become, some of my videos are going to not just be stamps. I mean, I talk a lot about stamps here, but some of it's also business and management information and real lessons from the trenches about how to deal with people and how to handle work situations and how to handle the real nuts and bolts of hiring people and managing them. And, so what I had to do today was really listen and empathize. When I talked to my guys and they expressed their concerns with my initial plan, because my initial plan was to basically just crank up the hours, give them the responsibility of doing most of the lotting and the assembly of the lots, which I was doing, and basically saying, learn it. And when I got some pushback and some objections and some caution that, look, I don't think this is going to work, I had to sit back and I had to say to myself, okay, is there another way to do this? Am I looking at this in, from all angles, or am I getting, into a situation where I think that my way is the right way, and I'm trying to force somebody to fit in to the way I want to do it. And ultimately I came to that conclusion that I wasn't considering that there was another alternative here that would see Josh giving up work that he really doesn't like to do and that stresses him out and that makes life hard for him, to give it to Will, who actually enjoys it and is hungry, actually, for more responsibility and, more opportunity. And so we're going to give that a try. I don't know how it's going to go. I'm sitting here now, just going to show you. I'm now sorting material. So just going to turn this around. But I've got these boxes. So the theme this week that Will's working on is British Africa. So I got one box here. I went through, if we go here, like I've gone through today, all of the boxes in this closet here. Everything there, okay, which I took off the shelf over here. You see where you got all those red boxes up there? Actually, where they were was in this part of the shelf here, this little cubby hole here. That was completely stacked full of red boxes. I had some on this table over here that had some material in. You can see I've stacked up some empty ones there. So that's where I consolidated. And in the cupboard here, this whole row up top here was full of red boxes. So what I've been doing this afternoon is taking all those red boxes, going through them, pulling out anything that's British Africa. So there you got a Transvaal stamp. Or, we've got a cover here from, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, right? Or anything at all that was British Commonwealth from that period. And then so I wound up with that box I showed you. There's a second one. And then over here, we got a third and a fourth. So there's 4 boxes of British Africa. So the first thing that comes out of this exercise is that there's no way that Will is ever going to get through 4 boxes of British Africa in 1 week. So even though I put on the schedule that we would do British Africa in 1 week, we're not. This is going to take probably 2 or 3 weeks. The way that it has for virtually any other theme that we've ever done. This is what always happens. It takes longer than we think it will. But at least it's all in one place. And so what I'm going to try to do tonight is I'm going to finish the sorting. I'm going to get it ready for Will. And then tomorrow I'm going to sit with him and I'm going to show him what my process is when I go through a country and how I decide what to lot and what to leave. And how do I describe those lots and how do I look them up and how do I get into the more detailed work. And then I'm going to leave it with him. And I'm going to trust him. And I'm going to let him lot it. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to take this Canada here that I sorted out last week and I'm going to lot that. I'm going to do my 100 lots with that. And I'm going to try starting that tomorrow on Tuesday. So rather than scrambling and trying to get these guys their lots, I'm going to give them everything. I'm going to give Will everything he needs tomorrow on Tuesday morning. And I'm going to leave him alone. And I'm going to trust him to get it done. He knows what he needs to do. He knows he can talk to me if he runs into trouble. He knows he can ask me questions. He has everything he needs from me. And he'll tell me if he's unable to do it and if I need to step in. And he'll hopefully tell me that sooner rather than later on Wednesday or Thursday. And